What's the scariest fact you know in your profession that no one else outside of it knows? As a librarian, you'd be horrified how many books we get returned and have to throw out because they're absolutely covered in bed bugs. We put a block on accounts and notify patrons, but I'm specifically told not to mention this problem to the public whatsoever by management. Story 2. Climbing into an unventilated manhole can kill you in seconds and you wouldn't even know anything was seriously wrong. You think that's air you're breathing now? Manholes can fill with gases that are heavier than breathable air. You think you're breathing normally, but instead you fall unconscious and suffocate from lack of oxygen. Story 3. Yeah, you know that feeling you get that you really need to breathe if you hold your breath for a while? That's not due to your body feeling the need for oxygen. It's your body feeling that it's got too much carbon dioxide in the lungs. If you're breathing gas mixture that doesn't contain CO2, then you won't feel like you're running out of breath. You'll just pass out and die. Story 4. Probably how painful and long dying naturally can take. I work in memory care and have cared for so many people dying. It's not a nice conversation with a loved one and then peacefully drifting off to sleep like in the movies. Sometimes it can take days, up to 2 weeks once they transition before they take their last breath. Sometimes they scream and writhe for days while unconscious until they pass. Morphine should be a human right. Assisted self-unaliving should be a human right. Yeah, that's horrible. If it's drawn out and painful, I totally agree that it should be an option to just go ahead and put them out of their misery. That's horrible. Story 5. I work in a shelter. Some of our guests are from middle and upper class backgrounds. Bad choices, bad health, bad treatment, bad luck can happen to all of us, sometimes very quickly. As far as I can tell, the only thing all homeless people have in common is trauma and loss. Story 6. I'll never forget the very awkward conversation I had as a chef with a guest in our dining room. She ordered our current fresh fish, but only cooked to about medium. I told the server we could only offer this fish well done. The guest was unhappy about that and asked to speak with me. I tried to beat around the bush a little at first, but finally just had to very bluntly but politely explain that this specific fish, manchong, aka sickle pomfret, is very prone to parasites and worms. They're very visible when we butcher the fish, and while perfectly safe and delicious fully cooked, it's not an option for sashimi or less than well done. She changed the order. Story 7. Used to live with a lady that worked in child services. She was one of the toughest cookies around, but some nights she would get home, grab a bottle of wine, walk out to the back deck, and just 1,000-yard stare until the wine was gone and she smoked a packet of cigarettes. I wouldn't even ask how work had been those days because you could tell she'd been wrecked by something. I couldn't do it. People are so effing disgusting to children. Story 8. I work in homelessness. There's lots of scary stuff about this work that people are probably aware of or are intentionally ignorant of, but one of the most scary/shocking things I learned in this work was pretty early on in it. There are lots and lots of reasons that people experiencing homelessness may be dirty or not shower frequently, but I've had it reported to me multiple times that a female client is refusing to shower or practice hygiene because being dirty, unclean, stinky prevents men from essaying her when she's sleeping outside. Both very scary and very sad. Story 9. Lifeguard. I cannot explain to you how quiet and how fast drowning is. Even people with some idea tend to think, okay, so barely any noise. No, there's nothing. You might get some splashing right at the beginning if someone's just panicking, but I've seen an adult man get into trouble with absolutely no sound. Even if someone can get their mouth out of the water, they're so locked in on breathing and not dying that they won't yell. Their arms and legs are under the water, and they're struggling so hard that nothing can make it to the surface to splash. You won't hear it. Please, please, please do not take your eyes off your kids in water, even the bath, for even a second. That's all it takes. In my career, I've seen drowning, but I've been fortunate enough to not see drowned. Would love for it to stay that way. Story 10. One time a few years ago, I was at Six Flags Park with a friend. We were at the wave pool, and I swam off to the deep end to get hit by the waves for a bit. For some reason, my gaze locked onto this kid who was in the deep end. He immediately stood out to me because his face looked completely panicked and frozen, and he was too deep where his feet couldn't touch. He was facing the shallower end, like he wanted to go there but couldn't move. His body was completely rigid and his face was tilted up, but waves were just washing over him repeatedly. I took all of this information in about a split second and then spent the next second sort of second-guessing myself. I glanced around real quick, realized nobody seemed to be seeing what I was seeing, and then just swam up behind the kid and pushed him to the shallower area until I made sure his feet were touching the floor. What's funny is that as soon as he could stand and was coughing/moving on his own, I had this immense flood of anxiety about touching some random kid, and I swam away before he could even turn around to see me, lol. But anyways, I guess the moral of the story here is that drowning doesn't always look like the movies. That entire time, the kid made no sound and didn't splash around. It's sheer luck I happened to be in just the right place at just the right time because nobody seemed to be paying attention to him. Yeah, whether you did it for credit or not, instinctively you knew that he was drowning, and I absolutely would have done the same thing if I were in your shoes, so I totally get it, and forevermore you're going to be his guardian angel, whether he remembers that or not. Story 11. Working in the sleep world, many people go to bed every night with untreated/undiagnosed sleep apnea. It's not entirely uncommon to see people's oxygen levels dropping to the mid-70s every night, and this is part of their normal routine. Incredibly dangerous, and awareness should increase further. Story 12. The laxity in healthcare facilities. The staff is under such stress, here in Canada anyways, that a lot of corners are cut to try and save time, but it eventually always comes back to bite you in the ass. Hygiene protocols are not respected. Patients left in their filth because you have one nurse for 40 people with alarms going off everywhere. Sterilization processes not being followed as they should, increasing the risk of nosocomial disease. The list can go on. I remember starting to work and being all happy about helping people. And in the long run, you have to adapt to the crappy place because if you try to follow the norms, you'll quickly get reprimanded by wasting time/resources or whatever by your superiors. The longer I work by helping, the more bitter I become. You're basically fighting a battle that cannot be won, no matter the effort you put in. It's sad because at the end of the day, the patient will be the one to suffer. I'm not saying all employees do their work correctly. Hell no. I see plenty of lazy-ass people, but the system rewards those people the same as the one breaking his balls off trying to fix it. The longer I try to do good, the more cynical I'm becoming in this society. Story 13. When you go to trial, the truth doesn't matter one lick. It's only what the evidence can show. So many clients struggle with this concept. In a criminal case, if you go to trial and lose, you'll most likely get a harsher sentence than you think. Elected judges believe they have to appear tough on crime and hope that threat will convince you to take a plea deal so they have fewer cases on their trial docket. Story 14. I work in a state mental health care hospital. We have many patients with violent history, even some that are incarcerated, but placed in the hospital for competency evaluation or as a judgment penalty. They tell many stories to new employees in orientation. One is told to emphasize the importance of observing and protecting patients in temporary restraint. Many years ago, before they had the rule of continuous one-to-one observation on restrained patients, a man was placed in a restraint chair and left alone for several minutes in a hallway. Another patient came up and decided to pull the restrained man's eyes out. I can't imagine being in that poor man's position. We have to sit in the restraint chair and be strapped down during training, so we see how it feels to be unable to move, and to emphasize the importance of fixing the strap so the patient can't harm themselves or anyone else, but also not so tight that they lose their breath or regular blood flow. When my turn came, I kept thinking about the terror that man must have felt. Unable to move, unable to escape or fight back, the only chance of help is to call for staff that you also don't trust because they just put you in this position. It's so effed. Story 15. I stop hundreds of cars a year from running over children and adults as a crossing guard. I'm only there 2 hours a day, 5 days a week during the school year. It's insane how dangerous it is for kids to walk to school. Edit. If anyone sees this, please remember that your local crossing guard stands there 10 hours a week. They know which kids are safe, and which kids will run out without looking. If we're making you wait longer, there's probably a very good reason, like a kid on a bike is coming that you can't see. Please, we aren't there to inconvenience you. Do you think your local town wants to spend like 8 to 10K per guard per year at each crossing? Story 16. At the large national insurance company I work for, I'm assuming to some extent, probably every national insurance company, everyone's homeowners policies that are being renewed are at a minimum increasing 40%, but it would be more accurate to expect your homeowners insurance to increase 55% or more the next time you renew. The 40% guy was an over 2-year-old customer and had an excellent credit score with no other history of claims. Story 17. No, Victorian Egyptologists did not import mummies to use them as kindling/train fuel/fertilizer. They did, however, import them to chop them up for decor and paint. And one almost blew up the Sphinx with dynamite, but the Egyptian government caught wind and intervened. Also, a lot of archaeological finds were thrown in the garbage for not being pretty, including the remains of the sixth pharaoh of Egypt, about 5,000 years old. Story 18. I work with government documents and read a lot of internal emails. Two things I found out. Many of these people can't write or spell worth a damn, borderline unreadable sometimes. One person was complaining about an increase in vendilisum. The bar for too crazy to work for a regulatory agency is a lot higher than you think. One person explained that their psychic powers showed them that all their coworkers were involved in some pretty extreme sex crimes. Story 19. There's not much that's terrifying in the world of mortgage lending, other than the finality of wire fraud. You're getting ready for closing, communicating with the closing agent daily. They send you their account numbers for your wire, and you send a huge wire transfer of all your savings to make the biggest purchase of your life. Then, the next day, the title agent asks when you're going to send that wire. It never arrived, and they've never seen the account numbers that you used. That money is gone. No one can recover it. No one's on the hook. It has been entirely stolen from the buyer. Edit. I should add that you can avoid this by calling your original contact from the title/closing company directly, confirm their number on the internet, and verify the account numbers with them verbally. Story 20. Dilution is the solution to pollution. I work in the industrial cleaning industry. You wouldn't believe the things I've seen. I've been in kill plants, chicken, beef, pork, pet food processing plants, hospitals, hotels, schools, you name it. I've been there. They all stand behind this motto. The EPA stands behind this motto. OSHA stands behind this motto. And you think recycling matters. LMFAO. Without oversight, this planet is literally being poisoned. We're being poisoned. No one in a high-value position cares, and this is how some people get paid and put food on their table, by turning a blind eye. Story 21. Stepping barefoot in a puddle of hydrofluoric acid, or exposing that much skin to the stuff in general, is absolutely lethal, and no one would really be able to know what happened to you, nor would you even think about it at the time if you weren't aware of what it was. HF is technically a weak acid, think vinegar, so it's not going to burn you like hydrochloric or sulfuric acid would. However, you'll start developing vague flu-like symptoms and stop breathing in around 3 days unless you treat the exposure immediately. Calcium glucinate gel is the gold standard. The extremely simplified explanation is that it just draws enough calcium away from the stuff that keeps you alive, and unless you neutralize it with a big, whopping dose of the stuff locally, you're pretty much doomed. While it is fairly specialized, it's not nearly as controlled as one would expect, given just how dangerous it is. Story 22. Little late to the party, but I do electrical safety work for power systems in large factories, and those things can be nightmare fuel. Everyone knows about electric shock. You touch something that is live and the electricity passes through your body. It can cause you to lock up, grip and be unable to let go, or even kill outright. Few people know about electric arc flash. Instead of the electricity going through you, it can go through the air to reach another conductor. Doing this creates an immense amount of heat that essentially causes a small explosion. Small arc flashes are scary but survivable with the right PPE. Arc rated, not just fire resistant. Large arc flashes are only survivable in arc flash suits that are just bomb suits. People outside of electrical work probably aren't familiar with arc flash suits, but electricians can tell you they're no joke, and they shouldn't be, because that level of heat turns you from biology into physics very quickly. So from what I've gathered in reading this, I did see a video during a football match where lightning struck the field and 10 people just immediately hit the deck. So I'm assuming that this is similar in concept, like they all just kind of served as conductors for each other through the electricity. I mean, I don't know. It's unfortunate that it happened to those people, obviously, but like you said, you go from biology to physics very quickly. Story 23. All these people working administrative jobs that depend on computers, 90% of them don't really know how to properly use them, nor do they really know how to use the basic softwares like Excel, Word, and PowerPoint. Maybe not very scary, but incredibly frustrating and depressing for me, especially each time I'm called by a colleague to solve the easily fixable problem they have, and I'm not from the IT department. 2 hours ago, it was because a colleague didn't know how to turn off the formatting marks in Word. Story 24. I used to be a teacher. Every year, or every so many years, we have professional development sessions to attend where we're sold on a curriculum and how this one will help our children, blah blah blah. It's a whole big thing. There's buy-in, there's excitement, and a whole dog and pony show about why this curriculum is the right one for our kids, because of course it's about the kids and they come first. Color me surprised when a teacher asked, when are we doing a curriculum training on this particular thing? And the district person says some bullcrap about how it's not on sale anymore, so we're no longer using it, and actually we're buying this one now, because if we sign up for this training and invite this speaker to come here, we'll get 30% off the curriculum for the next 3 years. Rinse and repeat. Education is a effing business. The curriculums aren't special for the kids, they're on effing sale. Story 25. A large amount of what we know about mental health is based on fabricated data. Edit. Examples would include obvious studies such as power posing and the Stanford prison experiment. Both use cherry-picked falsified data. Other things that typically come up is how for many graduate students and PhDs, your career is based on your ability to publish. Replications don't often get published, and so there's intense pressure from universities to constantly be finding something new. As a result, many in the academic community will alter stats or blatantly create data in order to maintain their careers. Universities don't look closely at said data because they have a vested interest in you publishing. Journals have little to no true oversight, and your ability to publish determines your future. Studies that do have good data only truly apply to white men. For example, everything we know about ADHD is associated with male behavior, even though women often present differently. Yes, they can present the same, but there are specific behaviors more common in women. The trend continues across all the DSM. Oh, even the DSM is almost entirely for insurance purposes and very good for diagnosis. Many therapists use criteria found in the ICD, which is also based on the healthcare system, although somewhat less so. Story 26. If antibiotic misuse and overuse continues, we're going to have lots of deaths from previously treatable bacterial infections and diseases. A lot more drug-resistant infections are popping up, and hardly any/no antibiotics work on it. Lots in elderly and in general. Most patients are contact precautions, isolation gown, mask, gloves, in hospital to not spread to other patients at risk. Lots of it is hospital-acquired too, so it's a vicious cycle of transmission. It also takes multiple years to develop new antibiotics, and these things are becoming resistant faster than we can keep up. We're looking at, in a worst-case scenario if this continues, a world where an infected cut can kill you because nothing can treat it. Story 27. Former college professor here. The environment is catastrophically effed, like so supremely effed beyond imagination. Even the most optimistic of my colleagues are always framing things in terms of, if we only do X, Y, and Z, then my children will still have a world. Reader, we will never do X, Y, and Z. Ever, ever, ever. Story 28. Lawyer here. Cops lie a lot. They don't know what rights you have and don't have to the degree that they should. They will cover for each other in the lies, and a ton of judges give their testimony way less scrutiny than they should. Edit. Adding that I'm referring to lies during traffic stops, in their documentation, and under oath on the stand. Story 29. We monitor every item in person while you're on store property and create behavioral models from the data to strategically force you to buy things you otherwise wouldn't care about, and our innovations have directly translated into national security applications for mass surveillance and defense. We also share the data gathered while you're in the store with everyone from the FBI to the NSA and CIA using third-party data brokers. We even got radar in the parking lot that detects people and stolen merchandise. Story 30. Software developer here. Maybe it's not like this everywhere, but at my company, when projects are behind schedule, they start cutting features to release it on time. It's almost always security concerning items. This is why I don't do any banking on my phone. Story 31. Most college professors have absolutely no training in education. Nada. Zilch. And the more famous ones, think Ivy League, most states' flagship universities, don't give a damn about undergraduate education. They only care about faculty scholarship and/or their sports teams. You want a good learning experience in higher ed? Go to a regional undergraduate college where faculty are expected to be good teachers. Want more higher ed? Go to one of those research factories that don't give a damn about undergraduate education. You'll be getting the best of both worlds. Story 32. I'm a web developer and work for a large hosting company. constantly seeing WordPress-powered sites exploited because of various plugins or pirated themes, exploited to distribute CP. Sure, you know that CP is bad, but when you actually see it, you realize how bad it is on another level. Story 33. I do hair for a living, and have for the last 16 years. It's probably how little many hair professionals clean their tools. Everything metal, clippers, shears, etc. should be sprayed with disinfectant spray. Combs go directly into barbicide after use. If you drop one, you're not supposed to pick it up until after the service. If you drop a tool like shears, you can pick it up, but you need to disinfect, wipe it down, and wash your hands before you touch the client. And your barber or stylist should never be pulling a comb from a barbicide to use on you. They're supposed to sit in the barbicide for at least a few hours, and then the jar gets dumped, everything rinsed and dried off. Fresh barbicide in the jar, combs in a sanitary container. I've lost count of how many violations I've seen over the years, and some of it to most people seems like overkill, but diseases like ringworm can spread very quickly if clippers or shears are not thoroughly disinfected between each person. Story 34. As a surgeon, families keep their loved ones who are dying alive because they cannot accept death. This leads the medical team to basically prolong and basically torture people to death. Imagine your frail grandma on death's doorstep and her heart stops. The family wants everything done because she's a fighter. So our team does CPR, breaks her ribs, intubates her, drills a needle into her tibia for an IO, stabs her groin for a central line, gets heartbeat back, and proceed to poke and prod her dying body for another week in the ICU. Not to mention, this costs the healthcare system insane amounts of money. Most of my friends in medicine do not want any of this kind of care for ourselves or our loved ones. So again, just kind of reiterating what I said before. I know you don't always have a choice, but it would be great if this could all be communicated beforehand, before you're unable to say, hey, I just want the morphine, I want to go, and not leave it up to other people to decide. But yeah, that's inhumane. When you put it this way, it really does sound like torture. Story 35. That foreign IT contractors, mainly from India, working in the healthcare industry likely share their passwords and or computer screens with unvetted friends who view confidential patient information. I believe this is true because I could often hear them talking to each other while on the phone with me. I'd help a contractor with something like logging in, but there would be a whole room full of guys on the other end of the phone, and not across the room, literally sitting next to the contractor talking to him. I suspect maybe they were sharing the workload. One guy's salary split between multiple people can still be a lot of money over there. Story 36. I used to live in an island called Kinmen, just right off the coast of China, technically part of Taiwan. There used to be mines everywhere, and I mean everywhere. Officially, it's been demined, but locals know there's still about 20% of mines that are still out in the wild. There is an incident that a cow stepped in an anti-tank mine. Half the island heard it, but the cow wasn't accounted for. Story 37. A bridge was built in southern Nevada about 15 years ago at the cost of $150 million. Despite all the fail checks and safety checks and layers of professional engineers, a potentially catastrophic failure was found by the junior engineer as he walked the bridge for a final check before it was opened for traffic in a huge public rollout. Expansion joints are absolutely crucial to any bridge. Simply put, they allow sections of the bridge to move slightly to account for wind and temperature fluctuations. As the engineer walked the bridge, something seemed off. He walked the bridge a second, then a third time. The bridge was designed and constructed with no expansion joints. By the time the faulty bridge was brought down and a new bridge was designed and constructed, the final cost was above $400 million. Not a word was released to the public. Story 38. I worked at a very large and prestigious oceanography institute studying climate science and climate change, and yeah, we're effed big time. Fisheries collapsing, microplastics and everything everywhere, ocean rising and acidification, storms getting gnarlier, mass extinction, the list goes on and on. Many of peers were childless and I think low to high grade depressed because we were watching our planet die on macro and micro levels. Of course, there were many optimistic aspects of research and fun projects, but overall, we knew we were just rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. Story 39. I worked in an animal shelter. That cute puppy you got but did zero training with and then dumped when it began big and crazy and did not find a home? Shelters got loads of adoptable pets every day, so they can't always help the less adoptable ones that are stressed and become dangerous. Also, the number of people bringing in their own pet but say they found it is astonishing. We can tell when it's your own dog. We know. We know you just don't even care enough to tell us its name or what food it likes or anything. Story 40. Outside of incredibly high-end manufacturing and shipping, the entire infrastructure, logistics, and manufacturing process in the United States and the world is held together by duct tape and a prayer. Sure, we've gotten a lot better about a lot of things, using good manufacturing practices and such, but most people are winging it as they go, and we only continue to function not because of processes, but because people decide to make it work anyway. Story 41. If you have a hoarse voice for an unknown reason, it could be due to warts growing in your vocal cords. If not treated, they could eventually choke off your airway. That's why all voice referrals have to have a medical eval before we try therapy. Story 42. Toxicologist. The world is literally effed. Everything you eat, drink, and breathe is poison and affecting your organs, cells, and DNA. You're irreparably damaged by stuff in the environment from 40 years ago that isn't degrading, and it accumulates everywhere. You could be exposed to something as a child, which will lead to a neurodegenerative disorder when you're 45. Your fertility is decimated. Every man is now 1/8 of their grandfather in terms of sperm count, and not even going off grid is going to protect you from pesticides because even if you aren't using it, your neighbors might be, and it's seeping into the groundwater. I've had to accept that health is relative, and we're giving our children a toxic nightmare which they will not wake up from. Story 43. Single-family home renting is absolutely destroying the housing market. Not only are their prices way too high, but many companies will actually buy up several homes in an area and not do anything with them for almost a year so they can choke out an area, fix the price, and then bring in a rush. Couple that with the fact that for sheer profits they make, there's no excuse for shoddy refurbishing and lack of continued maintenance. Couldn't be in that industry anymore. As someone that lives in Los Angeles and, the greater Southern California area, this is absolutely 1,000,000% true, and it sucks. Story 44. I work in hospitality, and the scariest thing is how unqualified everyone is. When I stay at a hotel, I'd like to think I'm safe and secure with staff who will look out for me. In reality, the staff are working at a hotel because they dropped out of school at 16 and have no idea what they're doing. During our last fire training, whilst trying to express how important it is to get the evacuation right, a group commented that they didn't care what happened to the guests because if the building burns down, their job will be gone anyway. Story 45. The software that runs the world depends on some random person thanklessly maintaining a critical software library. If anything, XKCD understates the problem. There are multiple of these critical single maintainer dependencies. If just one of them gets quietly backdoored by a malicious change, much of the internet could be hacked. See also the XZ branch. It doesn't even require a malicious or paid-off code maintainer, just someone who's overworked and doesn't look closely enough. It's even worse with proprietary software versus open source. You don't even know who's maintaining the code and have limited visibility into what it does. See also the SolarWinds breach. Story 46. In the field of cybersecurity, there's a known fact that might not be common knowledge in the general public. Many of the devices in our daily lives, like smart TVs, baby monitors, and even fridges, can be hacked. These devices often run on outdated software with known vulnerabilities, turning them into potential entry points for cyber attackers to access your home network, spy on you, or disrupt your life in ways you might not immediately notice. Story 47. Entomologist working disease and pest control for an organic farm. Growing seasons are rapidly getting longer, which means longer reproductive periods for insects to the point where we're seeing some of them completely bypass traditional seasonal gap periods. Higher temperatures also mean much higher rates of evaporation and evapotranspiration. So general humidity has been off the charts. This leads to outbreaks of fungal diseases you would never expect to see at certain times of year. Even in non-agricultural settings, fungus and mold growth has been unnervingly bad this previous summer. While everyone's rightfully worried about cooking or burning to death, people aren't considering that we're barreling headfirst into the area of fungus and wet bulb deaths. Story 48. I work in social media management. We have access to so much information about you, and we're able to create targeted ads based off of it. If you have a Facebook or Instagram account, the information you're giving us access to is astonishing. If we want to target an audience set that has an iPhone, made 5 phone calls today, has downloaded the McDonald's app, has messaged their friend about Taylor Swift in the last week, unfollowed their uncle 2 years ago, and took a picture of their dog today, we can find those people easily. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think if you just have a cell phone or smart device in general, you're subject to all of this. I know phones are bugged because I've had conversations with people. My phone's not even on, but just in, standby sleep mode, whatever. And we'll be talking about, hey, like, what do you want for lunch? Yeah, let's go to KFC for lunch. And then within about 5 minutes, I'll open up Instagram and there will be an ad there for KFC. I didn't actually search it, just talked about it. And, the phone picks up on it. So yeah, totally invasive. It just is what it is. It's the world that we live in today. Because let's be honest, nobody's going to be giving up their smartphone or smart device anytime soon. So you just got to learn to deal with it and be careful, safe, of course. Story 49. When I worked at PetSmart, the amount of dead animals because of negligence was astounding. One sweep under the aquariums would show mummified remains. Only animals worth over $100 were chased after. When I worked at a smaller pet store, they threw birds in the fridge to kill them, right next to employees' lunches. The fact is, there's a lot of death and cruelty in pet stores, and there's a reason why there's a push to ban it. Story 50. The people at the top did not get there by merit, and almost all of them are effing morons. Most of the people at the top of major corporations have no idea how their own business works, have never left the top floor of their towers, have never met a frontline worker. They were born rich, got mommy and daddy to pay for their MBA, and they entered the workforce on the 50th floor as regional directors in daddy's company. Hell, getting a CEO to sign a piece of paper is like pulling teeth, let alone getting them to show up at any given place for more than 20 minutes. And it's not because they're busy, it's because they don't effing work. They're rent seekers. They're on permanent vacation while spending every public moment role-playing, being busy, while never actually contributing value, whose most significant output is doing interviews on business networks talking about how busy they are to try and pump the stock price. For the people actually running the business, the executives are like intrusive landlords whose idiot whims have to be managed and mitigated. Executive help is a common euphemism for idiot moron in charge showed up for the first time in 6 months and derailed the whole project with a dip crap idea nobody could say no to. They don't even buy their own groceries. They're completely detached from human experience. They have no idea what it is to experience hunger or cold. They've never felt pain. They do not share with us the basic drives and motives that make us human beings. They're machines built on extraction and incompetence. Never, never, never assume the person in charge is smart. They usually aren't. To be fair, they aren't supposed to be. A leader is never the smartest person in the room. A leader is the person who brings the smartest people to the room. But we've lost that definition of leadership a long time ago, and now the people at the top are human hand grenades that could go off at a moment's notice if not handled delicately, whether it's because they're stupid or just because they're insecure and combative about being stupid. Story 51. I work in cybersecurity. The amount of people who go to adult content on their company computers is way too high. Plus the idiots that think they're skirting the system by trying to VPN from a VPN or attempt to bypass protocols set up by the company. Plus having to deal with CP more than once a year is too damn high. Story 52. Audio engineer here. It's truly terrifying how many hours it takes to edit a vocal or instrumental performance into something passable for so many artists. Absolutely horrifying. The good news is that there are some incredible musicians who don't require editing. I think it's the difference between people who want to be famous and those who deserve to be. Story 53. I'm a therapist, worked mainly with youths in public and private setting, 60 to 40 youths and adults. Most mental health issues don't shift until your environment changes, and for kids living with abuse/neglect, it's very sad that people and services, e.g. child protection, blame mental health when the issue is quite often the family, whom we spend a lot of our time with. Story 54. One of the scariest things I know as a receptionist is how much personal information I have access to, and how easy it is for someone to misuse that data if they're not careful. From addresses to phone numbers, and sometimes even financial details, I handle a lot of sensitive info. What people don't realize is that small slip-up, like leaving a document out or misplacing a file, can lead to serious privacy issues. It's a constant reminder to be vigilant, because the consequences of a mistake can be far-reaching. Story 55. I'm in school to be an investigator, and the people who essay children the most are relatives. Aunts, uncles, moms, dads, siblings. It's not a stranger in a van. Sure, that happens very rarely, but most of the time it's a relative sold/is selling the child. They're also the ones making content. It's hard to deal with. You'd be surprised the amount of upper middle class people who owe money to a lot of people are willing to do this to their child. Story 56. I work in finance, and it's horrifying how underprepared your average non-boomer American is for retirement. As costs for the big essentials, education, housing, and healthcare, have skyrocketed over the past few decades, wages have obviously not kept pace. Your average earning American, as a result, has been able to save less and less. 20 years from now, we'll see a lot of Americans going into retirement with minimal savings, still in debt, and being forced to manage largely off of Social Security. It's not going to be pretty. Story 57. The advertising industry is a machine that juices the creativity out of young people using their desperation as the blades. If you've ever met a cool or artsy person who looks way too tired or burnt out to be in their mid-20s, they probably have some very strong opinions on advertising, the military, or finance. Story 58. I work in IT. USB devices have been pretty standard since 2000, yet many people still don't understand how they work. They're also the older people that get confused when someone else's username is in the login box. They make no effort to remove it and put their own in. I bring that up because those people vote. Story 59. You have to constantly advocate for yourself and your cared ones to get the best out of your healthcare professionals and providers. Ask questions, do your own research, scrutinize what you're being told, ask others about what they've experienced, investigate your doctors' and hospitals' reputations. This is true in my experience in Canada, and from what I've heard, in the States too. Story 60. I work in higher education. There are a number of protocols for when a student or prospective student dies, but the scary part is that more staff members are more familiar with these protocols because they've had to implement them more often than they are with some otherwise pretty standard stuff. Story 61. There are medical devices, specifically implants, on the market that have been cleared because, quote, it's equivalent to prior devices. Those equivalent devices were marketed in the 1960s and had no regulatory oversight to get them to market in the first place. I know for a fact the technology and complexity of these implants has changed drastically from the 1960s, and there wasn't a requirement to have clinical studies on them because of the equivalency clause. I also know one company who got a device to market using this pathway that had serious issues shortly after launch that was extremely well hidden from the public. Talking about holes in places you shouldn't have holes, probably because they're paying off lawmakers, as this particular company has had significant reporting about potential nefarious dealings and money transactions with a certain politician's cabinet members. Story 62. I'm a vet receptionist, not a doctor, so what I'm saying is my understanding of what has been explained by multiple veterinarians over the past couple years. And I can't say nobody knows about it, but people outside of vet med usually don't know unless it's already happened to one of their pets. But how common urinary blockages can be in male cats, and it's fatal. You need to have thousands of dollars on hand for surgery to have a cat, and even then, there's a decent risk of the cat re-blocking later in life, or even immediately after the urinary catheter is pulled out after the procedure. It's incredibly painful, and if you do not pursue surgery or euthanasia, the animal will die agonizingly from a ruptured bladder, because it will burst. And the condition known as saddle thrombus. A blood clot forms somewhere in the cat's spine and gets lodged in between two of the lower vertebrae. This causes the cat's whole back end to become unusable. They drag their back legs because they no longer work, and is also agonizingly painful. On the rare occasion this can be treated or managed, I don't know about cured, if you go to a specialist/referral center, which again is going to run you a pretty massive bill. More than a lot of people reasonably have available. These conditions are so bad for these animals that we can often tell if one comes through the door with either issue just by their meow. It's different than just their I'm uncomfortable/in pain meow. It truly shouts, I'm in effing agony, and breaks my heart to hear every time. Story 63. Educator for 30 years. Children are trading real-life experiences for digital ones. Children aren't allowed/don't play unsupervised outside due to helicopter parenting, but are given complete unsupervised access to the internet. Rates of self-unaliving and depression is on a sharp rise. Most kids cannot read body language or facial expressions, so if you aren't constantly smiling, they assume you're mad at them. Story 64. Until recently, I worked at a dental laboratory that manufactured dentures and partials. The dentist would send us photos of the inside of the patient's mouths so the alignment of the teeth and jaws could be measured. Many people in this country have very bad teeth and gums. I'm talking horror movie level bad. And I don't know if it's down to poor dental hygiene or lack of access to dental care due to cost. Probably both, but this is the USA, and it shocks and saddens me. Story 65. Since alcohol and amphetamines get out of your system relatively quick, and construction is a job that's hard on both the body and soul, there's many drunk and high laborers out there operating heavy machinery and building our bridges, even on jobs that are drug test compliant. In fact, the quickness with which alcohol leaves the system compared to other things like marijuana leads to a lot more alcoholism in these trades. Story 66. I work in education, and I believe that the vast majority of middle and high school students are way further behind due to COVID than everyone thinks. I have juniors and seniors who are basically unemployable at their current level of education due to lack of maturity and also just because they're super behind academically. It sucks because there's really nothing that can fix this. Story 67. I work in disability advocacy, and during the pandemic, I attended a nationwide Zoom meeting where we were warned that disabled people would be deprioritized for ventilators even if their disabilities didn't directly affect their odds of surviving COVID. A lot of people didn't realize how many disabled people died during that time, and are still dying, because their lives were simply considered not as valuable. Story 68. Cybersecurity. The first thing I have to say is, a few years ago, no, Mr. Floyd, it has to be a different character in your password, not a number. Yes, Mr. Floyd, I realize that adding an exclamation point at the end of your favorite team's name ruins that perfectly good choice for a password. No, Mr. Floyd, you can't just change the name of the team to another with even less characters. Nowadays, hey, did you hear that the entire XXX branch of some government division is down? Is that right? Yeah, and it turns out most of their passwords are single 5-letter names and their date of birth. Also, they have free access to the internet. Also, their Wi-Fi password is the name of the manager's dog. Also, apparently some dude caused it by, checks notes, downloading some random app that turns out to be malware so he could watch a game of soccer on. Wait, but didn't that game stream on live TV? Yeah, it did, and it's free to watch, right? But it has ads. You know the X software, the one that gives access to highly important data from a lot of us citizens? The damn credentials were in text file in the desktop, weren't they? Named passwords.txt. People really have no idea. Physical security is pretty good, police there and all. Internet security in any branch that isn't the police or military is very lacking to borderline non-existent, and this is common across a lot of countries. Story 69. There's a massive crisis brewing in American primary care, and everything we're doing seems to be in service of accelerating that crisis into a full-blown catastrophe. Primary care physicians are a critical part of the healthcare system. They're the front line, they direct care and help to make sure patients end up in the right place at the right time. They also provide vaccinations that are very necessary to keeping public health from falling into absolute hell. But over the past 10 years, a number of capitalist forces have combined to make primary care more profitable. As with any other industry, this is done by making the service cheaper and, well, eventually much more crappy. Primary care docs now overwhelmingly work in a healthcare system rather than a private practice. Those systems require heavy patient loads and rapid turnover, double booking every slot every day. And on the other side, health insurance companies are getting more and more unbearable. Primary care bears the brunt of this. A significant amount of time you'll spend as a primary care provider will be in dealing with insurance bullcrap that will frustrate you in your efforts to provide decent care to your patients. This is resulting in some major shifts in primary care. First, fewer people are going into it. Doctors who retire from primary care are not being replaced. Their patient loads are just getting dumped into the local healthcare economy. Doctors who aren't able to retire, well, it's hard to switch specialties in the middle of a career. I say that as a physician who did it, against pretty much everyone's advice. Some are leaving medicine altogether, and some are switching up their care model to something called concierge medicine. These physicians basically purge their patient roles of anyone who isn't independently wealthy. They charge a retainer of thousands of dollars per year, and they keep a relatively small roster of patients to whom they are much more openly available. These people get the best care the physician can offer. They're seen on time. They get plenty of time with the physician during an appointment. If they have a question in the middle of the night, they can page their doctor. It's a great service, but of course it's only available to people with a lot of extra cash. When they switch to this model, they dump a massive amount of patients into the local healthcare economy. This increases the burden on the other physicians, and it's starting to create a vicious cycle. It's getting harder and harder to find a physician who isn't even accepting new patients, and when you do, expect to wait months for an initial appointment. Then you have to hope they don't bail for greener pastures. This is a well-known problem in healthcare, but it really feels like we're doing absolutely nothing to fix it while we do more and more bullcrap to make it worse. I really do worry for my own kids' future in this regard. Story 70. We're cutting huge corners on your house. It's practically thrown together with mistakes hidden or outright ignored. There's probably a few piss bottles hidden in the spaces under your kitchen counter. Our guys simply don't get paid enough to care. Most of them have kids and working hundreds of miles away from home, and probably are going through divorce or huge family problems. And if you're the type of person who visits the site a lot to make sure work is done right, we aren't going to do business with you. Story 71. Maybe not no one else, but as someone who worked in/at a hotel, everyone in that hotel is there for a different reason, and in a different state of mind. Sometimes you'll get shows and concerts, and you'll have a lot of people come for the same reason. But on any given night, you can have drug dealers, sex workers, people who want to unalive themselves, human traffickers, etc., etc., etc. Literally every night is a guessing game as to how it will go. Also, because it's a space where people are living, no matter how briefly, you can see them at every stage. Sometimes grieving, off their meds, drunk, domestic disputes, etc. I learn more about people through that job than any other. Most people are just there to visit the city or for work or a family vacation, or perhaps a romantic night out, family reunions, etc. So about 9 out of 10 are just your average Joe, but in a hotel with 300 rooms or more, you can have a pretty big mix. The reason I think a lot of people don't know or realize this is because people act incredibly inconvenienced when something goes wrong at the hotel and something doesn't go their way. I realize it's frustrating that I don't have a playpen for your child, but also a plain road of refugees from a war zone just arrived and their traumatized kids got there first. I know you're tired and trying to sleep, but a teenager with a disability is the one making the noise in the room next to you. No, I can't move them. The hotel is full. Yes, it's full. No, there's not an extra one. They're all full. A lot of people also do not take any safety precautions, leaving the door propped open, kids running around the hotel, on the roof, leaving the doors of their patios open, confronting other guests when inconvenienced. Hotels are generally safe, but do not ever convince yourself they're entirely safe, because they're not. People act like they're the only people on Earth, and a lot of them can't fathom that there are hundreds of other people with different needs in the same building. Story 72. Former newspaper reporter. If you don't have a dedicated local news source, I can 95% guarantee there are elected officials or public employees doing the shenanigans. And you'll likely never know because either nobody's watching them or they're being watched by a regulatory body that doesn't take it upon themselves to inform the public of anything. The lack of local news is a quiet crisis. Story 73. Most people think that by buying a new car that it will be perfect. I worked in a Toyota/Lexus plant in assembly, which is the final process for building a car. We had 2 processes there, cart and paint hospital. When the car came off the inspection line, anything mechanically wrong with it could be repaired by cart. Any paint defects could be repaired by paint hospital. The repairs were as good as original, but there are a lot of cars out there that have already been worked on before they ever left the plant. Story 74. A huge number of clinics are owned by venture capital organizations and are disguised to appear as if they're owned by the doctor. These clinics regularly perform unnecessary and substandard treatment on patients. It's pure evil. Glorified secretaries run the clinic under discretion from their corporate masters and regularly override the decisions of actual doctors. Any attempt by regulatory agencies to address this problem has resulted in defamation lawsuits targeted at individuals within the regulatory organizations. It worked. No further attempts are being made. In fact, regulatory organizations are now accepting funds from the corporate organizations. Patients are blind to the corruption. Fortunately, some doctors are able to retain integrity, but they're a few and far between. It's a minefield. Story 75. I worked in auto claims for a while. Insurance. If you're poor, there are virtually no consequences to you driving an unregistered or uninsured vehicle. It's extremely common for some lowlife or recent immigrant to be driving a clapped out Corolla with expired insurance and registration. They hit your car, causing tens of thousands of dollars in damage, and then they just drive away. If the vehicle has temporary plates, the paper ones, you'll never find them. If it has real plates, the police will just give you the name of the last known insurer. You call that insurance company, they tell you the policy is canceled because the new owner never paid their bill, and that's the end of it. No money for you. Sure, you could hire an attorney to track this person down and sue them, but you can't get blood from a stone. You can't get money if they don't have any to give. A lawsuit is going to cause you more of a headache than it does the criminal, so you might as well not put yourself through that crap. No matter what happens, the poor person ain't getting any poorer, so they always win this battle. They're just going to fix their car or buy a new beater and continue to drive around with expired or even fake credentials. Even if they get caught, it's just another ticket that they'll never pay. That's a good point. Poor people ain't going to get any poorer, and I've actually had this happen to me before where I got hit with a beater car that didn't have, tags or anything, and they just drove off. I mean, like, what am I going to do? Hunt them down and force them to pay, my insurance claim? So yeah, in a way, they are definitely protected. Story 76. Healthcare worker here. The amount of horribly bad surgeons and doctors is unbelievable. Cardiologist on call had 3 glasses of wine and came in for an emergency cath lab case. No repercussions. Surgeon who consistently makes gross mistakes resulting in bad outcomes for patients, he makes the hospital money, so let it slide. If hospitals revoke physician privileges, it gets reported to the state medical boards. When they apply elsewhere, it's shown on their credentialing report. So many times, the docs sue the hospital that revoke their privileges. It's costly, so the solution? Don't report and mutually agree to part ways. So wrong. Story 77. Chef. It's amazing the amount of violations that are committed in just a casual way, like leaving raw food out because it got busy, dishwasher not giving a crap about cross-contamination or changing the dishwater, executive chef licking his fingers and continuing to work, the holder where the unwrapped silverware is kept dirty as crap, people not changing their gloves, people not washing hands and just wiping them on the same dirty rag, all service after touching every kind of raw meat, and then going to make a salad with the last slimy bits of vegetables that they've been dipping their dirty-ass fingers into, all service, and the water is all discolored. The rats, cockroaches, smoking fryer oil because it's so dirty. Story 78. Car manufacturers know exactly where you live, work, and where your GF/BFs live. Cars have GPS and their own cell connection. People who have periods need to be aware of that in an age of surveillance. Car data can definitely be used to figure out if you're pregnant and are getting an abortion. Don't be paranoid, but do things like park a block away, take a Lyft or taxi to the abortion clinic, etc. Spread the data across lots of systems to make the correlation harder for Gilead law enforcement. Story 79. I work in information security. I think the scariest thing is that the state of monitoring in most companies, particularly non-technology companies, is woeful. Either things aren't being monitored, or more likely, there are logs and monitoring everywhere, but they all funnel into a system nobody reads because the amount of data is overwhelming. As a result, when I hear some company was hacked and had a data breach, I don't think, oh, they got hacked, I shouldn't use that company anymore. I think, oh, they noticed they got hacked. Everybody else is compromised too. They just don't know about it yet. Intruders can be in systems for months without raising an alarm at most companies. The fundamental problem is that despite all the AI machine learning promises of the security sales companies, the truth is that doing monitoring well requires having a bunch of actual human beings spend a lot of time, probably their full-time job for a year, tuning rules to eliminate all the unimportant data so that they can notice the important data. Generally, only the tech companies are willing to do this, because at a retailer or other non-tech company, good security engineers get paid more than their CIO does, and they're just not willing to hire them.